Bonjour, habari saleo. My name is Daniel Adeni, a professional officer at ECLE Africa.
My name is Sinetemba Mtetwa, an intern at ECLE Africa.
My name is Paul Curry, Manager of the Urban Systems Unit at ECLE Africa. On behalf of ECLE Africa, the African Centre for Cities, Our Future Cities, and partners, I'm excited to welcome all of you to the Rise Africa 2021 Action Festival.
Rise Africa has been growing as a platform of thinkers, doers, and enablers, committed to inspiring action for sustainable cities.
Rise Africa is about building active networks across academia, government, private sector, civil society, and the arts.
Our entry point is not based on articulating problems followed by proposing solutions, but rather on celebrating our cities as places of innovation and culture, while asking, what more can we do to make them sustainable, inclusive, and vibrant?
This festival is hosting 46 sessions from across 16 countries in Africa and the world. Every session aims to share new ideas, showcase ongoing actions, and launch new initiatives by bringing participants together to chart a new route forward.
We hope that the festival program will inspire you to commit to one or more specific actions that you or your organization will take on. As this session closes, you will be redirected to a survey in which you can articulate these actions. We will follow up on these committed actions throughout the year and offer resources, connections, and support. In this way, we are testing the idea that events can galvanize actions, and we hope that you will join us in this effort.
Beyond the session, there are many ways to take part in the festival.
Register for further sessions.
Vote for your favorites in the photo competition.
Watch a variety of inspiring video provocations.
Test your knowledge of African cities from our daily quiz.
And listen and dance to the Rise Africa 2021 playlist.
We hope that you will make all the attempts to reach out to new people and build long-lasting connections.
Before we begin, it is important to note that this session is being recorded, and that by participating, you are consenting to be recorded. All the recordings will be available on the program page after the festival.
And may I say that creative expression is vital for creating new futures for our cities. So we invite you to enter this session in the spirit of creativity and dreaming. Thank you very much.
To my future children, I bequeath this continent, borders lowered and turned into a soft pile of dust, smooth sand under steady feet. Your birthright is a country of flowers, a city that holds you even with your complicated lineage, the way this city has held my heart, held its arms out for all of the lost people who found solace in it. Your heirloom is this land and all its wormholes, portals hidden in plain sight between city skyscrapers, where people from here resemble people from far away places, and differences are muted while life happens. I reimagine you a country that does not cage its doves, a bequest of waters that pool precious histories, mountains that stand guard to protect against the unknown, a nation who preserves compassion over everything else, a mouth that can home many languages, and a spirit that rises above its fears.
I am Sarah Nkoli, and I am the founder of We Are All Africans. I would really like to thank Rise Africa Festival for allowing us to have this platform. And it's very interesting because the curator of this event was one of the contributors of the design issue of Field magazine, and it was an issue in 2016. And he wrote a couple of articles about urban planning in South Africa, and so great. So you see how we can all exchange and find each other in so many different ways. So today we're going to talk about the power of storytelling, and I have 4 wonderful guests. I wish I could have a lot more, but I had to choose. But what is good here is that you can definitely ask your questions, comment, and everything in the chat box or the Q&A here. But also, if you want to talk, you can just raise your hand and you'll be able to. So this is going to be a conversation that goes beyond 5 of us. So all the people joining this can definitely participate. So let me introduce the guests. I will start by the one and only Ure Tutiam, who is my mother, but she's a lot more than that. And I really wanted her to join us because she has had this, she has this very long experience, but she's also what I can really call a Pan-African. And I think it's rare to hear from her generation. So welcome, Ureitu. I hope that you can have your camera on, but try on the left, bottom left, try now, you should be able to. Okay, we still only see your forehead. Yeah, we still need to. Now we see a bit of the eyes, but we need a bit more. But yeah, great, you're with us. Thank you for joining, and I'll go with another lady. I hope you're okay with that, gentlemen. Going to introduce. Yay! Now you're too high, but it's gonna be fine. The other wonderful guest is Ifriqiya Kenge, who is joining from Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. And Ifriqiya is a journalist, digital media specialist, a storyteller. She's a lot of things, and her episode resonated a lot with a lot of people, especially women. So I'm glad that she's here. Welcome and thank you for joining Ifriqiya. And I'll go over to Farid, Unique, who is joining from Cairo. Farid is a lot of things as well. He's a journalist, a scholar. He's a multicultural Afro-Arab, and we're actually going to talk about this. Thank you very much, Farid, for joining. And Oluseyi Shonaya, who is joining from New York. And Oluseyi is also a lot of things. He works in technology, he's an animator, a thinker, a Yoruba man. And he's also multicultural, very interesting. And I think that if you listen to the podcast, he was the first guest. So he's the one who introduced us to the vibe of the podcast, We're All African. I would like to start this conversation with a poll, and then you'll be able to answer with one of this functionality. And my question to you is Africa a place or a feeling? And the second question is, which episode of the first season of We Are All African touched you most and why? For those who know the podcast, because I guess some people are joining and they don't know, but for those who know, let us know. So I'm just going to ask Yasmin, I don't know where they should answer and where it's gonna be, but yeah, if they can see the question and answer, that would be great.
I'm currently going to post it. It'll be in the polls function at the bottom of the screen. They should be able to see it in about a minute.
Okay, great. And so it's going to show, and while you answer this question, I'm going to start with a soundbite of Oluseyi and ask him a couple of questions. So, as I usually say in the podcast, so take a sit and listen.
I don't care if you think less of me because I'm African. Not enough for your pockets. I don't care. I'm African and I'm really good at this stuff. Like, I'm really good at this stuff. Whether contend or not, that's just gonna be for you. I don't care.
So Oluseyi is African and he's really African and he doesn't care about what you think. But what I really want to ask you today is that, Oluseyi, in this episode, you tell us that you were born in Ile-Ife, and you said that it's translated as the cradle of humanity for Yoruba people, sort of. and it's an ancient city, and you were there because it's also a university city, and your parents were professors there. And I would like to know how these sort of two worlds, so the contemporary one and the ancient one, how it collides and how it shaped your own identity?
It's a great question. I would say that if you look at the city of Ile-Ife today, there's actually a really stark division between the two. I would say that they're not as connected as you would hope, and they really exist as separate worlds. And we did live in the town for a little while, but then we moved onto the campus. And, you know, in these I don't want to use the word colonial era universities, but there's often like on-campus housing, right? It's a very different approach compared to like the United States, where nobody, no staff, no faculty live on the university campus anymore. But that was the experience in Nigeria. And I don't think that they're as connected as they should be or could be. I think that they live very separate lives. And that duality is then played out in a lot of people's own experience. One of the things that we frequently see is almost like the idea that people pass through school, but school doesn't pass through them. They gain a bunch of academic knowledge and understanding, perspectives, but it doesn't change their fundamental values. And so if the core of their person is rooted in a traditional way of being, then none of the modernity that they get from, formal Western style education interacts with that. And so you'll have someone who's at the pinnacle of their profession as a professor, as a, published speaker and author, who still believes that their wife is a witch who's, holding them back from success. And that's the duality that the city almost kind of expresses, that inherent duality. So yeah, I think that they collide and then they coexist. And perhaps because it's the Yoruba are polytheistic, and they do not inherently insist on only one integrated way of being or perspective. And so perhaps because it's a Yoruba city, that is embodied so deeply in Ife. But that's something I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, but I think that one of the things that I found also very interesting about your story, Oluche, is the fact that you moved from there to the US, back to Nigeria, back to the US. And then there was also something very interesting about your story because at the end of the day, you're African and American, but you're not African American, or you are. Tell us tell us what is the difference of what it is.
So first thing is I was born in the United States, and so there's a certain Americanness from not just being born there and having birthright citizenship, but also doing some of my elementary school education, nursery. Some of it happened in the United States, but my formative years happened in Nigeria. And so for me, in adulthood, I recognize that the core of my identity is absolutely Nigerian, right? That I see myself as a Nigerian first. My perspective is shaped by Nigerian experience and family and community and society. But I'm also extremely American. There are a lot of American expectations and cultural norms that I hold, that I appreciate and embrace. And I think the difference between an American African and an African American is where you think of as home, ultimately. The ability to say you have some other place that your family is from, your friends are there, you can return to. You're not as tied to the outcomes and destiny of this place the way an African American is. This is it for African Americans. A lot of their historicity was forcibly severed, and so they have had to invest in this place with all the disrespect that has come with that. And so they have a claim and a hold over this place that I don't, at some point if Yawa busts, I will go back to Nigeria, right? But for them, they've got to figure it out here. Their families are here, their histories are here. And I think that's the most fundamental difference. We think of ourselves, yes, as individuals, but also as our histories, as the continuities. We're talking about storytelling today. We are the culmination of the stories up to this point. And for them, the story had a massive interruption. So in many respects, their origin is here. For me, my origin is not here. And it's quite recent, quite direct for me. Literally, my mother is in Lagos right now. She's in the audience, but she's in Lagos right now. So for me, that is what makes the difference between being American African and African American.
Thanks a lot. And I can see in the chat that somebody said that Oluseyi's family is here. So thank you for joining. I'm gonna.
Hi, Mom.
Moms are the best supporters. And I'm actually gonna switch into French to speak to my mom. Merci beaucoup, Oureitou, maman, Natou, tout ce que tu veux, de nous avoir rejoints. Je vais d'abord passer un petit extrait de ton épisode, qui est un épisode qui a eu vraiment beaucoup, je crois que c'est l'épisode le plus écouté du podcast. Et donc, ça me fait plaisir parce que c'était pas facile de t'attraper pour qu'on le fasse. Et quand ça a démarré, enfin, je trouve que c'est magnifique. Et il a été coupé beaucoup. Et j'espère que je pourrai passer un jour quelques morceaux aussi qui n'ont pas été dans l'épisode, mais qui sont tellement riches. Mais déjà là, je voudrais partager un petit extrait. Et ensuite, je te poserai des questions par rapport à cet extrait.
On était soudanais. Il n'y avait pas le Sénégal. Ça n'existait pas comme nom. Ça n'existait pas. C'est quand la fédération, ça a éclaté. Ça, c'était encore un choc. Et c'est là où mon africanité va sortir, justement. C'est quand le Sénégal et le Mali voulaient faire une fédération que ça n'a pas marché. C'est là que le Mali s'est appelé Mali et le Sénégal, Sénégal. Mais sinon, c'était le même pays.
Et que s'est-il passé?
Il y a eu cet éclatement de la fédération du Mali. Moi, je ne savais pas ce que c'était qu'être Sénégalais. Je ne savais pas que nous, on était des Sénégalais et qu'on était un territoire pas sénégalais. C'était terrible. On a mis tous les Maliens, les diplomates maliens dans le train. Ils sont arrivés jusqu'à un niveau, sur un pont. Le train s'est arrêté là. Et il y a un autre train qui était de l'autre côté. On les a fait traverser. Et c'est là que les Maliens ont commencé à insulter les Sénégalais. Et à insulter à tort et à travers, à dire ils voulaient aller faire la guerre. Et on a dit, mais c'est quoi? Ça veut dire quoi? Qu'est-ce que c'est? Qu'est-ce qui se passe? C'est là où on a commencé à savoir qu'on était un pays qui a été divisé. Et puis que maintenant, il y a des portions. Une portion sera malienne, une portion sera sénégalaise.
Alors, maman, on voit juste ton front, mais c'est pas grave. Oui, c'est quand même un peu mieux.
Encore.
C'est quand même un peu mieux qu'on arrive à te voir parce que l'effet front est pas idéal. J'ai choisi cet extrait parce que je trouve ça vraiment... il y a une partie de l'histoire qu'on connaît et il y a une grande partie qu'on ne connaît pas. Et la façon dont tu l'as raconté pendant ce moment-là, moi, je voyais le train, je voyais les gens descendre, je les voyais monter. J'étais avec vous, en fait, dans l'histoire. Et donc, toi, tu es du Mali, du Sénégal. Tu nous as dit que tu étais Khasonké et tout couleur. Et ton père était aussi Khasonké et tout couleur. Ta mère est Khasonké. Tu es né au Sénégal. Tu as grandi au Mali, puis tu es retourné au Sénégal, puis tu as vécu en Côte d'Ivoire pendant une 30aine d'années, Et puis en Tunisie pendant presque 10 ans. Et puis là, tu es dans le sud de la France quand c'est parce qu'il y a Covid et que tu peux pas bouger. Et donc, il y a tous ces endroits, mais aussi des lieux, parce que quand tu as parlé dans ton épisode, tu as parlé de places spécifiques à Bamako où vous alliez comme jeune scout. Tu as dit qu'à Dakar, quand tu es né, vous viviez à Gueule-Tapée, c'est ça? Donc, en fait, tu vois, toi, tu as ces attachements au lieu, tout en étant quelqu'un qui a une vie quand même qui est très nomade. Et je voulais savoir tous ces mouvements dans tous ces endroits différents, quel impact ils ont eu dans la femme que tu es, enfin la personne que tu es, parce que je pense que tu es plus qu'une femme. Et ah ouais, ça, moi, j'en suis persuadée. Et par rapport à cet impact-là aussi, comment toi, tu as essayé de transmettre tous ces mouvements et ces mélanges aux gens autour de toi? Donc, c'est une grosse question, mais en même temps, pour une personne qui est plus qu'une femme, je pense que ouais, il faut une grosse question.
Je te remercie. Je suis très émue d'abord d'entendre ma propre voix. Je déteste ça. Mais le fait d'avoir vécu tous ces événements à des endroits différents, à des moments différents, ça fait que j'ai appris beaucoup de choses qui me posent maintenant un peu mieux dans la vie. C'est-à-dire que c'est une multitude de petites choses, de petits endroits, de petits moments qui ont forgé ma personnalité et qui font que, par exemple, moi, je ne vais jamais prendre des armes pour aller dire que je vais tuer quelqu'un parce que il n'est pas rassemblé, seul, ou je ne sais pas moi, ou blanc ou noir. Pourquoi? Parce que j'ai utilisé ces petits moments et ces petits endroits comme des espèces de briques pour fabriquer une personne. C'est ça. Quand je vois, par exemple, les endroits et les choses dont on parle maintenant, on parle du Mali, on parle de l'Ivoire, on parle de Tunisie. À chaque fois, je participe à ce qui se passe dans tous ces endroits parce que j'ai l'impression que ce sont des petits bouts aussi.
On t'entend pas très bien. C'est comme s'il y avait des moments où le son part.
Bon.
Et là, on t'entend.
C'est parce que je bouge la bouche et tout ça, je reste pas tranquille. Je suis habituée à être prise en charge par des moyens techniques. Et moi, je m'assieds et je me laisse filmer ou je me laisse parler. Alors que là, je dois tout faire. C'est devenu maintenant, ça, tout le monde est devenu spécialiste en communication. Bon, voilà. Et je disais que, non, je disais que le fait d'avoir vécu en Afrique noire, en Afrique du Nord, d'avoir vécu dans la forêt en Côte d'Ivoire, dans la savane au Mali, au Sénégal, d'avoir aussi été au Niger, à des endroits, c'est-à-dire finalement, partout où je suis allée, j'étais à l'aise, moi. J'ai jamais eu l'impression d'avoir perdu quelque chose en allant ailleurs. Bien, au contraire, à chaque fois, c'était...
Alors, on t'a perdu un petit peu, mais je voulais dire justement, il y a quelque chose que j'avais trouvé très intéressant. Je n'ai pas gardé dans l'épisode, mais c'est vrai que souvent, je pose la question de savoir, je demande aux gens à quel moment vous sentez moins africain. Et je me souviens quand je t'ai posé cette question, voilà, je t'ai posé cette question et tu es restée silencieuse et puis tu as fait quoi? Ah non, ça, j'ai jamais eu ce sentiment et j'espère que je ne l'aurai jamais.
Non, je refuse. C'est un engagement permanent Et j'ai été forgée comme ça. Parce que nous sommes les premières, les générations des années des indépendances. Tout ce que je t'ai raconté, par exemple, concernant les problèmes entre sur la Falémé, la délégation malienne, avec tous les présidents, le président Modibo Keïta et tous les ministres maliens assis dans le train en train de voyager. J'avais 15 ans à ce moment-là. Je ne savais même pas ce que c'était qu'une nation. Mais ce sont ces hommes-là qui nous ont appris à aimer l'Afrique, à aimer l'idée de forger une nation. Voilà, c'est ça. Donc, je n'ai jamais eu un moment où je me suis dit, ah non, non, moi je ne suis pas africaine, je suis américaine ou je suis française. Jamais, jamais, je suis africaine. Quand on me voit, on voit que je suis africaine. On sait pas. D'ailleurs, très souvent, on ne sait même pas de quel pays, de quel côté je peux me trouver. Ça peut être la Tanzanie ou des trucs comme ça, parce que j'ai fait des études sur l'Afrique de l'Est, comme ça peut être même en Afrique centrale. Finalement, on ne peut plus savoir, parce que moi-même, ça ne m'intéresse pas trop d'insister sur les régionalismes et tout ça.
Alors super, merci beaucoup. On va reparler tout à l'heure, mais là je vais passer à justement quand tu parles des régionalismes et de ne pas vouloir forcément être lié à juste un espace. Je vais partir en anglais maintenant pour parler à Farid qui lui est dans une partie du monde et une partie de l'Afrique qui justement parfois a plusieurs influences et parfois on choisit une un peu plus que l'autre. So yeah, now I'm going to switch to English and I'm gonna give, I'm just gonna share a short, sorry, I'm trying to do two things at the same time. I'm going to share a sound bite of Farid and then we'll continue.
There is discrimination in daily life because Coptic names, they adopt Christian names like John or Paul. So there's a feeling that they're different, that they're Western even though
All of these things. Were you able to hear the sound or? Yes?
You talking to me?
Everybody, yeah, and you in particular? Could you hear it? No? People couldn't hear the sound. Okay.
That's okay. I could tell them now.
Can you hear?
there is discrimination in daily life because Coptic names, they adopt Christian names like John or Paul. So there's a feeling that they're different, that they're Western even though we have nothing to do with the West. Even Protestant and evangelical missionaries, American and British, who came at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries to proselytize, to convert Muslims, but they couldn't convert Muslims. So they started converting other Coptic Christians. So even then, they started seeing them as different. This idea that you're Arab or African and Christian at the same time is a hard concept to fathom, because normally Arab is associated, or Arabic is associated with the language of the Quran, hence you must be Muslim. So how can you speak Arabic but you ain't Muslim? So it's all of these things that you're negotiating with your identity.
Yes. So, yeah, Farid, you have many layers, and as I think we all do, but in the African context, North Africa, Egypt. So yeah, sometimes we kind of have, like, we all have different opinions and ideas about what it means and what it is. And I think one of the, like, the where I would like to discuss here is the fact that Egypt, and particularly Cairo, had a very, very important role in the history of Pan-Africanism, although some people may not really know that, or they kind of know, but they're not sure. So I wanted to know, how did you learn about that and when? And also a deeper question, I would like to know, what does it mean to be Afro-Arab?
Yeah, let me start with the second. I mean, I don't see myself as Afro-Arab, even though that term is used or has started being used. And I think if you really want to break it down, it's to understand what are the racialized dynamics behind countries in Africa that speak Arabic. So that term came into being. I think I use the terms interchangeably, whether it comes to Arab or African or Egyptian or so on. With regards to the first question, when you talked about Cairo being a center of decolonization, I mean, I started exploring that early on in my youth, and then at university, then I became really interested in that and reading other theorists who traveled to America, also like just understanding that Malcolm X came here to Cairo, prayed here, saw himself as a Muslim, and moved. He really embraced Islam as this not just a religion, but an ideological stepping stone to being towards freedom. So then I started finding out more. Like we had people like Maya Angelou, who spent some time in Cairo. You know, even people like Louis Armstrong and so on. Yes, I know that is not the whole story, but it gives you an idea of how Cairo was more cosmopolitan back then and embraced its African identity as a city, to the point that, you know, Kwame Nkrumah's wife was Egyptian. So all of these stories swirling around gave you an understanding that we're connected to other African cities, not just with having an Arab identity, and a strong one at that.
So how do you identify yourself, and why?
It's hard. I mean, it just depends on the context, yeah. So when I'm around other people, there's this idea of Akili Mbembe, who's one of my favorite theorists. He talks about Afro-pessimism, and he talks about how Africa is seen outside of history and how people view Africans. How most people look at Africans, and even within racist tropes of how we as Egyptians and so on and other Arab countries talk about Africa, it's the dark continent. Okay. So we have this disjuncture. We don't want to acknowledge that we're part of a 54 country continent. But for me, at a personal level, again, it depends on the context, who I'm with, what I'm feeling. And that's why the question was very pertinent. I think Africa is a feeling. Yes, it is rooted to a place, it's rooted to a city, but you can't run away from it. It's something that's deeply embedded within your identity.
Yeah, we're gonna talk more about that in the next section. And so now I'm going to switch to French again, and we'll talk to Ifriqiya.
Oui. Ah, ton micro est coupé, Sarah.
So, pardon. Alors, merci beaucoup, Ifriqiya. Je vais passer un extrait de ton épisode et ensuite, on va discuter un petit peu.
Paradoxalement, quand j'ai passé, la guerre est passée, je me suis retrouvée à Pointe-Noire, mais en fait, mon cerveau a oublié cet épisode, tous ces moments-là. La guerre avait quelque chose d'intéressant, dans le sens où ça a réussi à souder la famille, en fait, à retisser les liens, en fait. Ça, c'était quelque chose de... On était solidaires, on était vraiment en train de... On avait de la famille au Gabon qui nous envoyait du pétrole et du savon et du sel, parce que c'était une denrée rare dans la zone où on était. Et voilà, nous, on a vécu dans la forêt. Moi, je me suis réfugiée dans le bouquin que mon père emportait avec lui. Donc, moi, c'est la lecture qui m'a permis de me créer une petite bulle pour avoir un espace où je pouvais me projeter en tant qu'adolescente, avoir des rêves d'adolescente. Les bouquins m'ont permis de me projeter, de me créer un petit monde où j'étais ma propre héroïne, où j'avais des copains, où je flirtais, où je... Voilà.
Alors, un peu comme l'épisode d'Oreitu, ton épisode aussi, j'ai reçu beaucoup de messages de gens que ça a touché, particulièrement des femmes, parce que on est passé par plusieurs étapes. Donc, en fait, c'est ta vraie vie. Donc, nous, on passe en écoutant par plusieurs étapes, mais dans ta vie, tu es passé par plusieurs étapes qui t'ont vraiment marqué. Et il y a une étape qui est quand même très importante, c'est celle de la guerre civile qui éclate. Toi, tu as ta petite vie à Brazzaville qui est confortable avec tes habitudes et ta famille, et vous devez aller vous installer, vous sauver en tout cas, et vous êtes dans la forêt, vous êtes dans un village, tu n'as pas les mêmes repères, et après ça, bon, la vie reprend d'une certaine façon, parce que comme toi, tu dis dans cet extrait, tu as fait tomber cet épisode pour passer à autre chose. Voilà, mis ça quelque part. Et je me demandais comment ces déplacements, qui sont des déplacements qui ne sont pas vraiment volontaires, du coup, ont affecté ton sens d'appartenance à un groupe ou à un lieu ou à une identité. Je voulais juste rappeler que donc Ifriqiya, elle est congolaise du Congo-Brazzaville, et que là, dans un déplacement volontaire, tu es allé au Burkina, d'où tu nous parles.
Oui. Alors c'est assez étrange parce qu'on parle de... Moi, on va dire, je suis une fille de la ville, une enfant de la ville. Et donc, j'ai grandi dans les années 90. Et à cette époque, c'est vraiment une assimilation culturelle qui est très occidentale dans l'éducation. Donc, quand tu quittes ton milieu, tu es à l'école, où tu as des codes, d'ailleurs, des codes qui sont très, très occidentaux. Tu regardes des films américains, tu regardes des séries, et tu te retrouves au village avec... c'est vrai qu'on n'avait pas vraiment beaucoup de liens avec le village. Enfin, ton monde bascule, en fait. Ce qui fait qu'à un moment donné, moi, c'est vrai que j'ai développé une sorte de pathologie parce que je ne comprenais pas. Je ne comprenais pas aussi, et c'est vrai, hein, c'était une sorte d'acculturation, le fait de vivre en ville et d'oublier d'où l'on vient, en fait. Et c'était, même si ça a été un peu forcé, ce retour vers ma propre culture, donc le village, m'approprier mon histoire, ça m'a été quelque peu salutaire parce que ça m'a permis de comprendre mon histoire de famille et de me construire plus tard en ce que je suis aujourd'hui, en congolaise, en africaine, voilà. Et à l'époque, je maudissais, en fait, j'étais croyante et je disais, j'ai même fait la grève pour ne plus aller à l'église. J'ai dit, Dieu est méchant, il ne nous aime pas, sinon il ne nous ferait pas vivre ça. En fait, avec le temps, je me suis dit, en fait, c'était une belle parenthèse parce que ça m'a beaucoup appris. Derrière la guerre, voilà, ça m'a forgé, quoi.
Alors, il y a aussi et c'est pas seulement dans ton épisode, il y a eu d'autres épisodes aussi où des personnes se sont ouvertes, en tout cas sur cette partie-là, c'est-à-dire que bon, si tu vis dans un moment, enfin, quand il y a une guerre, et tu es enfant, tu es dans ta construction, il y a un vrai traumatisme. Je pense que c'est presque impossible que quelqu'un traverse des changements comme ça, de la violence permanente, l'incertitude, et n'ait aucun impact. Mais il y avait cette question dans le fait d'avoir pris ça et mis ça quelque part, qui est une façon aussi d'essayer d'avancer, et qui malheureusement, en tout cas, ou peut-être que c'est heureusement, je ne sais pas, mais on a vu qu'à travers le continent, c'est un peu une technique que beaucoup de gens font. Et qu'il n'y a jamais le moment où on passe à au moins essayer de ressortir la chose, parce que c'est vrai que peut-être qu'à chaque fois qu'on en parle, on revit le traumatisme et qu'on ne le veut pas. En fait, je voudrais savoir pour toi, parce que c'est là où on entre aussi dans ce pouvoir-là de raconter son histoire et ce que ça donne pour toi, parce que je pense que tu n'en parles pas beaucoup de ce passage, de cet événement. Dans cet épisode, et quand tu l'as réécouté, en tout cas quand tu l'as écouté, parce que tu m'as parlé, et ensuite moi je suis allée dans mon coin, j'ai fait des choses, et c'est devenu un épisode. Qu'est-ce que ça t'a fait d'entendre ton histoire et d'entendre comment tu la racontes? Parce que ça, c'est ta vie, mais c'est aussi comment tu la racontes, et c'est aussi la guerre au Congo, et c'est comment elle a été vécue par quelqu'un comme toi.
Ouais. Alors, ce qui est étrange, j'ai juste envie de te dire, tu sais, l'adage populaire sur le continent qui dit que l'Africain ne doit pas montrer ses, tu vois, doit taire, on n'a pas besoin de voir le psy, entre guillemets. En fait, c'était un vrai exutoire, et justement, je dois te remercier, Sarah, parce que s'écouter, en fait, je ne m'en suis pas rendu compte. Il y avait beaucoup d'émotions dans ma voix. Et d'ailleurs, tu l'as très bien mis en musique avec toute la musique qu'il y avait autour. Ça m'a fait revivre ces moments-là, mais avec un recul qui me permet d'identifier au moins les moments ou les questions ou les sujets ou les thématiques dont je n'ai jamais parlé, et qui ont aussi construit la femme que je suis devenue avec, ah oui, en quelque sorte, j'ai des fragilités en fait. Par exemple, sur la question de guerre, je me rappelle dernièrement, je suis allée à une cérémonie ici, une parenthèse, où on a tiré des coups de feu. Je n'ai pas compris, j'ai commencé à paniquer et je voulais me mettre à l'abri alors que c'était une cérémonie en fait, avec un roi et tout. Tout le monde a commencé à rire, mais moi, j'ai eu envie de pleurer en fait parce que je ne contrôlais pas cet état de panique qui m'a saisie en fait. J'étais en mode urgence. Donc franchement, s'écouter, ça permet de prendre du recul et ça a été un super moment thérapeutique pour moi en quelque sorte. En tout cas, merci pour ça, Sarah.
Et merci beaucoup pour ta confiance, parce que oui, c'est vrai que naturellement, tu as parlé de tous ces sujets-là, et que bon, moi, j'ai continué à poser des questions, mais j'imagine à quel point ça peut être aussi difficile de se replonger. Et je suis contente de savoir que toi, en écoutant, ça a été plus avec du recul que sur le coup, parce que juste encore pareil, une anecdote, quand on a été ensemble voir cette pièce de théâtre de la rwandaise, oui. Et je me souviens que c'était sur la guerre au Rwanda et les témoignages de femmes. Et je me souviens que tu t'es levée précipitamment et tu as disparu. Et je me t'ai demandé, mais qu'est-ce qui se passe? Pourquoi elle part? Qu'est-ce qui se passe? Bon, c'est vrai que c'est une pièce qui est dure. Mais après, en ayant écouté ton histoire, j'ai reconnecté et je me suis dit, voilà, les choses qu'on ne sait pas des gens et les choses dont on ne parle pas. À la fois, on parle de l'Afrique comme ce continent où les gens racontent des histoires, où il y a des conteurs, où il y a une transmission orale, mais il y a les choses qu'on partage oralement et il y a les choses qu'on tait. Et j'essaye un peu aussi, avec ce podcast aussi, de permettre que ce qui est un peu mis de côté dans le silence puisse avoir une plateforme, quoi.
En fait, c'est marrant parce que j'avoue, quand je l'ai réécouté, bon, même encore ça remonte, hein, j'ai des échos en fait. J'avoue, quand je l'ai réécouté, j'ai pleuré. Ça s'est revenu tout seul. Et j'ai pleuré, mais en même temps, j'ai réussi à mettre des mots. Donc, c'est ça qui est. Ouais, franchement, Ouais, je pense que sur le continent, c'est un peu comme les questions sur les maladies mentales. Il y a une espèce de mythe sur l'Africain qui est hyper fort, qui est ultra fort, qui est mentalement fort. Donc, alors, tu as vécu l'esclavage, tu as été fort, tu dois te relever, tu ne dois pas montrer que tu es… Mais non, 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 on doit… nos traumas, on devrait les soigner, on devrait vraiment, vraiment… s'en occuper, en fait. C'est pour ça que ça fait de nous des êtres, enfin, je veux dire, des névrosés sur pattes, si je peux me permettre de parler comme ça. Beaucoup d'Africains ont des névroses qui ne soignent pas, que ce soit dans les familles, que ce soit dans… Et toute cette violence qu'on charrie et qu'on porte aussi à travers nous, et ce qui, pour moi, en fait, c'est aussi lié à une question, pourquoi on a du mal à se développer, c'est aussi ça, on a plein de traumas qu'on n'arrive pas à soigner. Une guerre, on passe, on oublie, on fait la réconciliation, il n'y a pas de justice, et puis on passe. Voilà, c'était une occasion d'évoquer ça, en tout cas. Merci pour cette occasion.
Ouais, mais merci à toi aussi de nous avoir aidés à évoquer et puis de nous avoir permis de comprendre, parce que tu as parlé aussi de beaucoup de choses, notamment de ta construction en tant que femme, par opposition à ta mère. Tu vois, en fait, ce sont des dynamiques qui correspondent à plein de schémas que tout le monde vit, en fait. Et donc oui, c'est vrai que c'est un épisode qui est puissant. Et je pense que c'est la puissance de la parole et la puissance de décider que c'est aujourd'hui que je veux la raconter, et je veux la raconter comme ça, mon histoire. C'est comme ça que je la raconterai, et je la donne généreusement aux autres. Alors, je vais passer à Natou, enfin Oureitou, on l'appelle un peu des deux, qui elle aussi a pleuré en écoutant son épisode. Et moi, j'étais avec elle en fait pendant que je l'ai fait, donc j'étais un petit peu stressée quand même, parce que je me suis dit, bon là, c'est l'épisode de la mère. J'espère qu'elle va pas dire, mais c'est n'importe quoi ton truc. Et justement, maman, tu sais, tout à l'heure, tu as dit que tu n'aimes pas t'écouter, entendre ta voix. Et c'est intéressant parce que on n'aime pas entendre sa voix, ou on n'aime pas se voir. Et toi, tu as joué dans des films, tu ne les as jamais vus parce que tu ne voulais pas te voir, tu n'aimes pas écouter ta voix. Mais là, pour l'épisode, tu t'es assise, tu as écouté, tu as rigolé, tu as pleuré, tu as sauté dans tous les sens, tu as eu toutes sortes d'émotions. Et je voulais savoir qu'est-ce que ça fait d'entendre son histoire, parce que toi, tu as 73 ans, donc te mettre dans une histoire qui dure 1 heure, il a fallu couper des heures et des heures. Mais qu'est-ce que ça t'a fait à toi d'entendre, d'abord de la raconter, d'abord pourquoi tu as accepté, et ensuite, qu'est-ce que ça t'a fait toi de l'entendre?
Bon, moi je n'aime pas m'entendre parce que c'est d'ailleurs pour ça que j'aime beaucoup le théâtre. Au théâtre, on travaille, on présente quelque chose, on raconte une histoire, et quand on a fini, on passe à autre chose. Au cinéma ou à la télé, des années après, les gens t'appellent en te disant « Tiens, il y a tu passes à des moments où tu es sur autre chose. » Je n'aime pas, parce que ce qui m'intéresse en général dans les trucs artistiques, c'est le travail, la conception, le travail, l'activité de création, mais pas se regarder, s'entendre. Ah non, mais c'est horrible, c'est épouvantable. Et je l'ai fait parce que d'abord, j'aime ma fille et j'aime participer à ces activités de création aussi. Quand tu sais que, quand tu me dis, maman, j'aimerais que tu viennes faire telle chose avec moi, je le fais avec plaisir, parce que je sais que ça d'abord fait quelques petites fleurs en passant, mais ensuite parce que
le compliment,
c'est important, la confiance.
parce que le son est parti. Hein. Quand tu as voulu me lancer des fleurs, il n'y avait plus de son.
quand on travaille ensemble, en général, on fait du très bon travail. Et moi, ce qui me plaît dans la création artistique ou bien dans le travail de l'image, parce que je pense que la communication est très importante. Le problème actuel de l'Africain, par exemple, c'est le manque d'images positives. Nous avons besoin de personnes, de personnalités, d'images positives. Et malheureusement, les télés et les choses comme ça qu'on voit sont des fabrications avec d'autres images. Toi, chaque fois que tu veux, j'aimerais qu'on fasse ceci ou cela, de même que tes frères, celui qui veut faire quelque chose en disant, allez, maman, prépare-toi, on va faire telle chose, je le fais volontiers parce que c'est du travail, on est content et tout. Mais s'asseoir pour pas un acteur qui peut aimer ça, pas un danseur qui peut aimer ça. Non. Mais j'ai accepté parce que je trouve ça formidable de pouvoir, justement, ça c'est aussi notre témoignage. Et voilà, c'est l'histoire en train de se faire. À 73 ans, quoi qu'on dise, moi j'ai connu le temps, la fin de la colonisation, le temps des indépendances, les joies de la construction du socialisme malien. Et puis maintenant, il y a beaucoup de choses, c'est tout un cheminement. Voilà.
Justement, parce que quand tu parles des joies, et après tu connais aussi du coup et je pense que c'est ça qui peut être un peu, peut-être parfois un peu plus violent ou un peu plus douloureux pour vos générations, parce que vous avez eu l'énergie et l'engouement et l'ouverture d'une période, et puis vous avez vu vos enfants plutôt galérer être dans les sables mouvants, dans la boue, ne pas arriver à sortir, parce que je me souviens qu'il y a eu beaucoup, surtout avec mes frères qui sont plus âgés, il y a eu beaucoup de conversations où vous ne vous compreniez pas, parce que vous disiez, nous, à votre époque, ça coûtait tant, on finissait ça, on avait un boulot, qu'est-ce que vous faites? Vous êtes trop lent, vous n'y arrivez pas. Et en fait, c'était parce que le monde aussi et surtout au niveau du continent africain, il avait changé, mais les espoirs, l'engouement, on était passé à autre chose. Et je crois qu'on est encore un peu dedans. Et je me demandais aussi, parce que c'est vrai que quand il y a eu ton épisode, donc il a résonné en plein de gens. Là, je vois ici qu'il y a Lise Gomis qui avait commenté en disant justement que son épisode préféré était le tien, parce que tu as vécu un moment particulier, un sentiment particulier de ce que c'est l'Afrique. Et dans ton histoire là, je pense que ce que tu nous as permis de vivre, c'est ce sentiment-là, tu l'as partagé avec nous. Donc, je me dis, quelqu'un qui a des origines africaines, qui n'y a jamais été, qui écoute ton histoire, a ce sentiment-là. En tout cas, ça crée quelque chose, ça lui donne une force. Et en même temps, je me souviens aussi que ma belle-sœur, donc la femme de mon frère, a dit, je l'ai écouté avec les enfants et c'est bien, c'est un témoignage pour les enfants. Donc, il y a cette transmission aussi qui est quand même hyper importante. Et je me suis dit, tu vois, on était là avec le téléphone, le son qui marche pas bien, les conditions qu'on a pu pour faire et qu'on laisse une trace. Et moi, je voulais savoir pour toi, parce que tu as écouté les épisodes des autres, des gens qui sont beaucoup plus jeunes, qui sont dans d'autres endroits, qui ont d'autres histoires. Et qu'est-ce que ça te fait à toi d'écouter aussi ces autres histoires, parce que du coup, il y a ces autres africanités, ces autres identités, ces autres appartenances.
Je voulais encore te remercier parce que moi, j'adore écouter les histoires. J'adore qu'on me raconte la vie. Pas sa vie romancée en mentant, mais quand j'entends, je lis beaucoup de biographies, j'aime beaucoup échanger, partager les souffrances et les douleurs et les joies des autres et tout. Et donc, chaque fois que j'ai écouté une histoire, j'étais vraiment, à chaque fois, je t'envoyais des petits papiers en disant
putain, ma fille, c'est adorable, j'ai adoré telle personne, j'ai aimé telle chose. Et je dis que c'est formidable, c'est très, très bien le travail que nous tous, là, nous avons fait quand même, et nous te le devons. Voilà.
Bah, merci beaucoup. Moi, je vais pleurer bientôt hein, parce que c'est compliment en une après-midi. Et je voulais aussi dire à Oluseyi qu'il s'est fait adopter par ma famille. Il ne le sait pas encore, mais ton épisode, toute la famille a dit « Ah oui, non, mais lui, il est un peu comme nous. Il va se l'approprier. »
Et il ressemble.
Et en plus, il ressemble beaucoup à un de mes frères. Donc, tout le monde écoute et s'identifie ou trouve ou des ressemblances. Je vais passer en anglais maintenant.
Oui.
Merci beaucoup, maman. So yeah, Farid. So I'm just switching in English now. Yeah, and Farid, your episode as well. It was very deep. It was fun. I love Gigi. But it was very deep because you are in Egypt. You talk to us about the reality of what is happening now and what has happened in the last 10 years and the shifts and the hopes and now the nightmares and all of that. But it's also a full story because I think that you are someone who is very complete. Although you think that you have like this loss of sense of identity, I do think that you're a very complete human being. I wanted to know how it felt for you to listen to this, to your story, and I had to call you back last minute and and ask for more questions and all that. But yeah, how does it feel? And what did it bring to you?
Well, that I talk a lot, so that's number one. I mean, and I like talking about myself, but it also speaks to the wider idea of migration and why so many young people have left the continent and still do every day in tragic circumstances. And then you have the upward middle class who can travel and like my parents and so on. So it's just sometimes it really brought back that idea to me that there's a lot of creative potential in our cities, but sadly they're not used. They're just stifled. Really, it's really sad sometimes to see because you have young people doing some crazy, amazing things, and then they're appreciated overseas. So I mean, as an example, I was just watching that there's Adidas ads of all, and they're highlighting African players. So they're highlighting Mo Salah in Liverpool, who's Egyptian, they're highlighting Paul Pogba, all of the, and then I think to myself, well, he didn't get his chance here. So that's the sad reality of it, but also in that, we dominate in so many fields. I think that's something to take away from our conversations. What you're doing, I mean, you started a magazine, then another one, and then you're going back and forth. You live in London, which in itself is an accomplishment. Why would you want to live there? And then now you're doing this podcast. And what I love about it, and a lot of people commented, you would have seen, is it's direct and it talks to us in our vernacular. So we are all Africans. It tells it all. There's no BS about it, and there's a sense of immense pride about it. And I like that from the other conversations as well. We get that sense of how they're inspired by being on the continent, but also how it informs their lives being African.
Okay, Farid, you
Did I break up?
Yeah, but it's fine now. You were left there with the mouth open. But
Oh, wow.
yeah, no,
That's the internet connection here.
Yeah, that's the reality, right? That's part of the reality. And yeah, I can't answer why I'm in London, especially today, because it was a very special day. It's very gray and cold. But I've tried, I have these colors. You can think that it's hot and
very colorful,
beautiful.
Very yes.
But one thing that I find, like, what you said about a lot of Africans are abroad and they've been recognized for what they do outside of the continent. I'm one of those, fortunately or unfortunately. Yes. I get more opportunities and my work is more respected outside of the continent. So I am out. I can go back, but I'm very aware of the fact that I will always be African everywhere I go, but I may be more African outside and be able to do a lot more than when I'm in Africa. Sometimes it's a painful realization, but I think that it's that, and that's also like the sense of this conversation is you just are, and so you can carry it with you everywhere, and you don't have to feel a certain way because you're not actually there and sitting there, or you were not born there, or you haven't traveled there, because you, in a way, how it feels and you want to connect. But I think and it's for a lot of people, but again, in this sense of being able to have people tell how they feel about being Africans and what it means for them, and without having a set idea before the conversation, I think it also allows us to have lots of surprises, because then we may think something. I may think something talking to you, and then I learn so much from your experience that then I like that, because then I start deconstructing so many other things about you, about me, about myself, about the stances that I'm taking. So I would like to thank you for that, because it was interesting, because there is your episode and you're talking about your journey and you're Egyptian, and there was Emna, who is Tunisian, and both of you live in the continent, but the journeys are different. But there is, like, I think it's rare when we talk about Africa to talk to people who are not from sub-Saharan Africa. So thank you for accepting to join the conversation and to have like the episode with me. But also, I think we also need to connect more with this side of our identity. So thank you, Farid, for sharing with us. And I like the fact that you talk a lot, because then I was able to get all these amazing stories just at the same day.
You can pack it in.
So it's Oluseyi. Oluseyi, you also told us so many, like, you are in a way, so that's, I had to call your episode the brilliant mind, because you are a philosopher, but you also brought so much energy. It was such a positive energy. We listened to you. We leave that episode and we want to be you or your friend, or at least be, when we talk about people who want to have closeness with white people, we want to have closeness with Oluseyi. So,
I mean, you said I'm part of your family now, so
yeah, you're part of the family.
There we are. Okay.
So
Hi, Mom. Now I have two moms.
Two moms. Your mom. Please allow us to have a bit of your son. So I wanted to know again for you, because we had a pre-call and then we had another one.
Yeah.
And, when you heard the episode after these long conversations, because usually when the conversation is long, you don't remember what you said. You're not so sure about how it's gonna, what is she gonna do with that? So how did it feel? And also because your episode is also one of this like most listened to, and I could see a lot of people commenting. So what is the feedback that you received after that?
Okay, so for me, listening to the episode, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought you did a great job with the edit. It was also interesting to see what choices you made about which aspects of the conversation you left out, which parts were just, for us. But also the connectivities that you pull together between different points in the story, the ways you integrated the sound and audio effects, overall the feeling of the episode that you created. I thought it was a fantastic job. I really enjoyed it. I like listening to myself. But I also find that whenever I listen to myself, the voice is different than what I hear in my head. And I think a lot of us have that same experience. So it was interesting from that perspective. But then much more interesting than how I felt about it was the responses and the feedback and the engagement I got from friends and familiars and also from strangers. It got really interesting. I had a young lady, she's American. Her family is of Scandinavian origin, who reached out to me and said that she just really felt moved by the comments on identity and on, kind of knowing and being who you are and putting your elbows out. And it's kind of sent her on this whole journey where she now wants to travel back to Sweden to discover, her family and connections. And the fact that someone who nominally has nothing to do with African identity could nevertheless get so much out of that. I thought that was very encouraging, very gratifying, and I hope that in those kinds of exchanges of our different ideas and perceptions, we can learn more. Of course, I enjoyed my own episode, but then I really started to enjoy comparing and contrasting with the other episodes, learning from other people's stories and perspectives and narratives, and maybe seeing some limits in my own experience. For example, my own experience is sheltered, privileged, devoid of conflict. I'm not sure how exactly to phrase this, but I saw people who went through a lot more negotiation of identity, who experienced a lot more conflict around who they were, where they lived, and on all those dimensions. And my life has largely been free of that. I know that I carry a lot of distinct privileges in me and with me as I move through the world, but it was really fascinating to have such a focused set of comparison points. So as a project overall, I thought it was fantastic. And I want to pull on something that Farid said a little bit earlier about, our stories and storytelling. One of the things that consumes me is that we are now doing the work of figuring out, the stories are historicity, stories of the past to understand the present moment. But when we talk about the challenges of the continent and not being recognized, not having the opportunities and people being forced, so to speak, into the diaspora, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we haven't crafted stories of the future. Like, who will we be? Who do we want to be, right? And so many of our countries lack that coherent vision of where we're trying to get to. And so therefore, governance has no specific objective beyond personal enrichment. And so the infrastructure is absent, the developmental context is absent, and people who are trying to do the things of modernity, because those are overwhelmingly the people who leave, trying to do the things of modernity and of the future, very often feel forced to leave, feel like they won't find the opportunity to thrive if they stay. So I think, the heading again of today's session is the power of storytelling. I think it's invaluable for knowing who we are, where we've come from, what we've been. But I think it's also so important for setting a vision of who we can be and where we're going and what we will do. So overall, we are Africans, and then we will be Africans of the future too.
Yeah, Africans of the future. I like that. I really like that. Yeah, I think that there is always this, we always have these conversations about the lack of vision, or maybe there is, but it's not clear, but I think it's also, it's good to and even just to dream, right? Like just to just decide that this is the vision and try. It doesn't matter if it doesn't happen the same way, but still be able to dream and not just think that that's what we see is only what we're gonna get and nothing is gonna come out of it. Thank you, Oluseyi, for the insight. And I want to, so that's the last part of the conversation, and I hope that we'll hear a lot about our friends that are here listening to us, friends and families, because this is the part where it's more about listening, because that's also one of the intention was about we say that we don't hear story, but do we even listen to stories? Do we even take the time to just listen and not react and not have an opinion and not compare and not just listening? And so my question to all of you, and you can put the comments in the how do you say, like in the chat, is how do we listen? But we as a whole, as human being, because you mentioned something, Oluseyi, and it's true. It's that, I mean, yes, a lot of Africans listen to the podcast, but a lot of other people, like so many people, completely different, but they're also interested in the conversation. Sometimes it's because they think that they know nothing about Africa and also being African. So they think they know, but they don't, and they listen and they discover other things, but also because they can relate to the conversation around identity, because it's broader than just being African. It's about who we are and what we do and how we move through the world and we move around. So how do we listen? So that's my first question to all of you. And my second question is, how do we reflect on what we hear? How do we do that? And yeah, let me know who wants to talk, and if you, just you have the floor. How do we listen? And for some of the people who listen to this episode, how did you listen? When did you choose to listen to this episode, or the ones that you didn't want to listen to? Oh, I'm seeing a comment here, Oluseyi, from Oluyemisi Ogundipe. Sorry if I didn't pronounce this well. Yeah, very correct, Oluseyi. We need to look at who we want to be, can be, and a future journey in that, and or around that is the vision, which we need so badly. Yeah. And I have Lise Gomis, who said that she listens to the podcast when traveling. And she's saying that, yeah, I'm right. And because we don't listen, and the real question is, what are we listening to? Yes, as well. Noemi who is also who was a guest of the podcast. Noemi is a Canadian. Her family is from Angola, so she's Angolan Canadian, and from the Congo as well. And she said that she listened without expectation, with the mindset that she will learn something. And she said that she listened to the podcast when her mind is quiet. Listen with an open mind and with interest. Yeah, I think the open mind part is like one of the most important part is, how you can't really listen if you don't have an open mind. I'm still, anyone? What I did here, I'm trying to do something.
Yeah, so I can elaborate on that a little bit, right? For me, when it comes to podcasts in general, I do tend to listen to them while I'm doing something with my hands that does not require a lot of cognitive overload. The idea being I'm getting something done productively, but my mind is then available to really listen and hear and process. So I have a morning news podcast, about 15 minutes a day, that I listen to when I'm making breakfast and things like that. And then often when I'm doing dishes in the evening is when I want to, okay, this is my time now. Just gonna, clean up and listen to a podcast and take in a different perspective in a way that I can deeply engage with the ideas. And so what Noemi said about approaching with a open mindset and the idea that I'm going to learn something new. In general, if I don't think I will learn something from a podcast, I don't think I would listen to the podcast, period, right? So that's just how I prefer to approach things. But I also like what Elizabeth said, in the before times, when I was in the car is when I would also listen to, because driving is not super cognitively engaging. And so that's a great time for also catching up on some podcasts.
Great. I have like some comments here. Yeah, because Liz is saying that, yeah, being open-minded is key. And that what she sees is that mostly people want to listen to what they already know. And I think even for African stories, it's like, that's more or less that. So people have a preconceived idea and they want that, they want this to come back to them, and they get confused when it's not the narrative that they were expecting. And she's talking about, it's like just like going to parties, and if the DJ is not playing songs that we want to listen to, we just I really like that, just leave the floor. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, the analogy is amazing. It's great because that's true, that sometimes we come in and we pretend that we do not have expectations, but we still do. And we're like, oh, no. If it's this, no, I'm not joining it. And I would say that this is something that I also learned thanks to this experience of doing this podcast. Because at the start, this idea was not supposed to be a podcast. It was supposed to be a video series. I had this huge, ambitious project where I would go to all the countries in the continent and publish one video per day. And it would be a short video anyway. So back to reality. So it's good to have a vision and dreams, but then money is not there. COVID is there, energy is lacking. And then I was just like, okay, I have this, I'm just gonna go and do it through the internet. So one thing that I've learned is that I posted this thing saying, yeah, if you feel African, you really feel African and you wanna talk to me. So some friends like Yuta, a friend of mine who is a great friend of Oluseyi, sent it to him. He came and he said, yes, I would like to tell my stories and my story. And a lot of people did. So I didn't know these people. I had to have an open mind, and I had to also be ready to hear anything. And I'm very happy that the people who wanted to talk to me or wanted to share their story with the world were people who were also so open-minded. I didn't hear, because I was really scared of, homophobic type of, or tribalism, or I was really like, okay, how am I going to handle this? Because I'm definitely not going to use it. I'm not interested, and I don't want to share that. Because and I didn't have that. People wanted to talk about their own feelings and their sense of belonging. But I feel like I've learned a lot because I was open. I was just like, okay, come, let's talk. Tell me your story. And I don't know if we usually do that. We tend to talk to the people who kind of, and most of the time we talk about the fact that, block people or negative energy. We don't want that, this and that. But how do we need to listen. We learn from listening. Oluseyi said, I wonder if there wasn't a self-selection in that the people who wanted to share expected to also hear others' story and thus were inherently open-minded. Yeah, maybe. So we have 5 minutes left. There was this poll, and the question was, is Africa a feeling or a place? 86% think it's a feeling. And 50%, I don't understand how we can have 86% and then 50%, but anyway, 50% think it's a place. And I think we all think that it's both, a place and a feeling. But I think I really do feel like, that feeling, it's yeah. I like your comment, Oluseyi. There is an African election joke in those poll results. Yeah, it's above 100%. 43% of people loved your episode, Oluseyi. Nigerians, is it a number thing or what?
Well, there's also a bias factor in that it was the first episode, right? So, nevertheless, I would like to thank God and my mother. Stop. But thank you, everybody.
Yeah, and it was multi-choice. Yeah, of course. So there was first episode, second episode. People who don't know the podcast yet, who haven't listened to the episode, please do so. I'm going to put, so it's on it's on Spotify, Apple Podcast, but also on the website. I've just put the link there, and and take a seat, listen, take the time that you need. And so we've like it's the first season is completed, but I'll be working on the second one, and in the meantime I've been working on the side on a version in Spanish and Portuguese for Spanish and Portuguese people speakers, but also a lot of Afro descendants who are in Brazil and in Latin America in general, because I think that their stories are also very powerful and they really mirror some of the stories that we've shared. And for the second season, if you want to tell me your story, you can send an email to this address and tell me a little bit about yourself and why you want to tell your story. And then we're just gonna talk. I have some people I'm supposed to contact and I've just been swamped. But anyway, you don't need that, all this information. Okay. I'm super happy because one of my closest friends managed to follow us, and she's in Australia. So she connected from down under, and I think now it's maybe 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. And Maman, c'est Emily. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed the conversation, because I enjoyed it a lot and I was quite emotional. I tried not to show, but I think that for me, it's very powerful to listen to your stories and also to tell my story through yours. But it's also very powerful and important for me to have my mother here with us and to have her share her feeling, her stories. And also, you always want your parents to be proud of you. So that's also something that I really appreciate. She's proud of me, but she's also proud of all of you, because she tends to be the mother of everybody. As Mama Africa type of vibe. So this is a great moment. It's good for me to also sometimes just be able to connect, and maybe one day we'll be able to connect face to face. But I would just like each of the guests to just have a final word, and we'll wrap it up. And and I hope that you're just gonna go with leave this Africa Day and this event and this Rise Africa with a good spirit. So, Ifriqiya, what would you like to share?
Ah non, mais moi j'étais très émue d'avoir partagé ce moment et d'avoir beaucoup appris aussi pour les différentes histoires. Et je voulais faire un petit coucou à Farid. C'est Farid. Pour le petit clin d'œil à mon prénom, c'est Ifriqiya. C'est un peu la connexion qui nous manque entre les différentes Afriques là, et le fait de voir que finalement on est, parce que encore même en Afrique, je veux dire l'Afrique noire, on a toujours ce regard un peu, le Maghreb, l'Afrique dite blanche, on n'est pas connecté. Et ce qui est intéressant, c'est que finalement nos sources communes, c'est intéressant qu'on finisse par se reconnecter, de savoir qu'on est du même continent et qu'on va travailler pour faire avancer ce continent. Merci beaucoup à Oluseyi également, et merci beaucoup à Maman Natou. Et voilà, c'était un bon moment de partage. Je vous envoie beaucoup de chaleur depuis Ouagadougou. Hein. Il y a un peu de poussière aussi. Voilà, pour ceux qui sont dans le froid. Merci pour tout.
Merci beaucoup. Natou, ton petit mot?
Je dis merci à tout le monde et je dis qu'on est pour un continent sans frontières. On est forts, tous ensemble, et on va aller de l'avant. Merci encore. Et il faut encourager les échanges. On a besoin d'images, on a besoin de sons, on a besoin de voix, on a besoin de parler, d'échanger. Voilà. Merci beaucoup, beaucoup. C'était très, très intéressant. Moi, j'adore ce genre d'échange. Merci encore.
Merci à toi. Farid?
Merci beaucoup pour tout. Thanks for bringing us here today. It was really cool connecting with people. And now I have to go back to the podcast and listen to chaque episode. So yeah, I'm really happy to have met everyone on the panel and just connecting. We're in a good moment now where on the continent where everyone has the same issues, like what you said, Olise, about African elections, for example. We all got that as a problem. So it's good that we're connecting on African issues that affect us, from police brutality and so on. So thank you, Saron, for bringing such nice stories. And Afrika, I was really moved by your stories. And Natu, of course, we love you always.
And Oluseyi, who is who opened the first season. So you're gonna have the final word here.
Well, thank you so very much for including me in this project. It has been a delight. I've really enjoyed it. I've gotten to know more people through it. I've gotten to know some people better through it as well. And that's been fantastic for me. I want to say thank you to everyone who has shared their stories, both those who are here today as panelists or attendees and those who aren't, because I know this is being recorded. People being willing to open up and share their stories and help us discover the commonalities and the lessons we can learn from each other is so vital in this moment that we're in. And I want to leave us with this thought, that now in this particular time, because we have these rich communication means and infrastructure, we can see and learn firsthand so much about each other. We don't have to wait on some agency to mediate the stories. We can share our stories directly, and we can discover just how much we have in common, how similar our circumstances, our challenges, and our opportunities are, and the ways in which we can work together to achieve that future we desire. So I am extremely excited for what comes next for all of us. And so thank you for being here and for being part of this. And thanks for letting me join you.
Thank you very much. So yes, thanks a lot. Thank you for joining, and thank you for accepting the invitation. I'm humbled and very good. Thank you, Oluseyi, for this last word. So we are like vision, future, and let's bring the energy there. Thank you very much for all the people who joined, and see you soon, hopefully.